The film begins in a high-security prison in America, where Riker, a notorious mafia boss, is serving time after being arrested for multiple charges, including drug trafficking and organized crime. At that time, Riker is visited by his son, Dobbs. Since Riker got caught and locked up, Dobbs has been running all of his illegal business. Dobbs promises Riker that he will get him out of prison soon, even though Riker was only put behind bars a week ago. He reminds Dobbs to manage their business carefully so they don't get into any more trouble. After the visit, Dobbs and his crew head to a bar to relax. While at the bar, Dobbs sees a news report about a former top Special Forces soldier named Gunner, who has received many awards from the president for his service. Gunner had taken down dozens of terrorists in Afghanistan who were threatening America. It turns out that the bar they're in is actually owned by Gunner, and Gunner is there as well, taking a break from work. One of Dobbs' men, not knowing that the bar belongs to Gunner, starts causing trouble by bothering Claire, who is Gunner's wife and working at the bar. And Gunner, furious, beats up Dobbs' man. Seeing his crew get easily overpowered by Gunner, Dobbs approaches Gunner to apologize. He promises to leave the bar and asks Gunner not to mess with him or his men anymore. After Dobbs and his men leave Gunner's bar, the police arrive because some locals reported a disturbance. Gunner explains that it was just a small fight and that he has already taken care of it. The police then remind Gunner not to be too rough, especially since he's on leave after coming back from his mission in Afghanistan. An hour later, Gunner and Claire head home to have dinner with their two sons, Travis and Luke. During dinner, Gunner tells them that he plans to go camping in the forest tomorrow. He hopes that Travis and Luke will join him for a fun family trip. Luke gets really excited and says he'll go with Gunner, but Travis refuses. Travis has already made plans with his girlfriend and doesn't want to cancel. After dinner, Gunner talks privately with Claire. Claire apologizes because she won't be able to join the camping trip. She chooses to stay and manage the bar since it's been really busy lately. Hearing that, Gunner understands, but he's determined to make Travis go camping with him and Luke anyway. The next day, Gunner and Luke are getting ready to go camping in the forest, but Travis isn't home because he stayed over at his girlfriend's house the night before. Gunner decides to go to the girlfriend's house to bring Travis back, even if it means doing it by force. When he arrives, the girlfriend's father doesn't want to let him in, but Gunner insists and walks into the room, finding Travis sleeping with his girlfriend. Soon after, Gunner wakes Travis up and firmly takes him out of the house. Before leaving, Gunner scolds the girlfriend's parents for allowing their daughter and Travis to sleep together, even though they aren't married. Later, Gunner is picked up by his friend, who is also going camping with them, and they head to the forest. Once they arrive, before setting up the tents, Gunner takes Travis and Luke for a walk to enjoy the scenery. That night, Gunner, his friend, and his two sons sit around a campfire. Even though Travis didn't want to come at first, he ends up having fun and is surprised by how much he enjoys the camping trip. As it gets late, Gunner tells his sons to get some rest because the next day, they'll be hunting deer. In the morning, Gunner takes everyone on a motorbike ride to hunt deer. Along the way, he notices a lot of dead animals and a dried-up river. Feeling that something is wrong, he tells Luke and Travis to stay behind while he and his friend go check things out. Soon after, they discover a drug factory hidden in the forest. The factory belongs to Riker, who is in prison, and is now being run by Dobbs. And Gunner, not wanting to take any risks, decides to leave, but unfortunately, his friend steps on a landmine near the factory, which kills him instantly. After the explosion, Dobbs' men started coming out, forcing Gunner to fight them all. While Gunner was busy battling Dobbs' men, Travis and Luke were captured by Dobbs and his other men. There, Dobbs shouted at Gunner to surrender because they had caught his sons. Hearing this, Gunner refused to give up and quickly thought of another way to save his sons. At the same time, one of Dobbs' men was secretly sending the location to the DEA agents, as he was actually an undercover DEA agent. Meanwhile, Dobbs, angry that Gunner wasn't coming out, ordered some of his men to hunt Gunner down. In the middle of the fight, the DEA suddenly arrived, causing Dobbs to run away, taking Travis and Luke with him. The DEA captured many of Dobbs' men at the factory, including Gunner, who they suspected was one of Dobbs' men. Gunner tried to explain that he wasn't part of Dobbs' group, but the DEA didn't believe him and told Gunner to explain everything at their office. Gunner was then taken to the DEA office, where the chief planned to interrogate him. There, Gunnar swore he wasn't involved with Dobbs and begged to be released because he needed to save his two kidnapped sons. However, the chief didn't believe him and thought Gunnar was just making up a story. This made Gunnar furious, and he started losing his patience. Luckily, a police officer who recognized Gunnar managed to calm him down and promised to release him as soon as possible. About 30 minutes later, Claire arrived to see Gunnar. She was really angry with Gunnar because their two sons had been kidnapped. Claire demanded that Gunnar take full responsibility and find a way to save their sons no matter what. At the same time, Gunnar got a call from Dobbs. Dobbs believed that Gunnar had brought the DEA agents to the forest, which caused many of Dobbs' illegal items to be confiscated. He demanded that Gunnar fix the situation. He told Gunnar to return the drugs that were taken by the DEA, and in exchange, Dobbs would release Gunnar's sons. At that time, Gunnar swore that he never brought the DEA and that he was just there to camp. He even told Dobbs that he was currently being held by the DEA himself. But Dobbs didn't care about Gunnar's excuses. He warned that if the drugs weren't returned, Gunnar's sons would be killed. Soon after, the police officer who recognized Gunnar came to see him. The officer told Gunnar that he had been cleared of any wrongdoing and would be released. Gunnar then asked the officer if he knew where the DEA was keeping Dobbs' confiscated drugs. He also explained that Dobbs was threatening to kill his sons if the drugs weren't returned. The officer admitted that he didn't know and said it would be impossible to tell Gunnar that kind of information, as it could cause big problems. Moments later, Gunnar was finally released, but now he had to find another way to rescue his sons. That night, Gunnar went to a nightclub where Dobbs' men usually gathered. He found one of Dobbs' men and started beating him up. Afterward, Gunnar asked where Dobbs was hiding his sons. At first, the man refused to talk, but after more pressure from Gunnar, he gave in. He revealed that Gunnar's sons were being held at a steel warehouse, which was one of Dobbs' hideouts. Hearing this, Gunnar immediately headed to the location. The next day, Dobbs was at the steel warehouse. He started to feel suspicious about the DEA raid because Gunnar swore he didn't lead the agents to Dobbs' drug factory in the forest. Dobbs began to suspect that one of his men was a traitor. He quickly gathered all his men and checked their phones one by one. Eventually, Dobbs found the traitor and killed him. After that, Dobbs rushed to his third hideout, thinking the traitor had given away the steel warehouse's location to the DEA. He also took Luke with him, leaving Travis behind with some of his men at the steel warehouse. About 20 minutes after Dobbs left, Gunnar arrived at the warehouse and took down all of Dobbs' men. He managed to find Travis, but Luke was gone. At the same time, the DEA arrived at the steel warehouse, thanks to the information from the traitor. Gunnar told Travis to go with the DEA while he went off to find Luke. That night, Dobbs was at his third hideout, where he had started a new drug production operation to replace the first one that had been raided by the DEA. Soon after, Dobbs went to Luke and asked if he was scared. Luke confidently replied that he wasn't afraid at all because he knew that Gunnar would come to save him. Luke even said that if Gunnar could take down terrorists in Afghanistan so easily, dealing with Dobbs' men, who were mostly just former street thugs, would be no problem. The scene then shifts to Travis, who had just been dropped off at home by the DEA. And Claire, worried that her son might never come home, hugged Travis tightly. At that moment, Travis received a message from Gunnar, telling him to go to the river near their house because Gunnar had a plan to save Luke. Travis quickly went to the river, and when he arrived, Gunnar asked him to search online for information about a prisoner named Riker and his prison location. It didn't take long for him to find out that Riker was a Mafia boss and Dobbs' father. He also found the prison where Riker was being held. Afterward, Gunnar told Travis to go back home while he would break into the prison to kidnap Riker. At that time, Gunnar had help from some of his military friends to rescue Luke and capture Dobbs. Gunnar's plan was to kidnap Riker and trade him for Luke. Hearing this, Travis didn't want to go home, and instead, he insisted on going with Gunnar to help save Luke. Finally, Gunnar agreed and brought Travis with him. Gunnar planned to skydive into the prison to kidnap Riker, and he told Travis to stay close to his friend Sean. When they were right above the prison, Gunnar jumped from the plane. Before landing, he threw a smoke bomb, causing chaos in the prison. Gunnar then entered the prison and knocked out a guard. Disguising himself in the guard's uniform, Gunnar was able to move around freely to search for Riker. Soon, Gunnar found Riker and pretended that Dobbs had sent him to break Riker out of prison. Without suspecting anything, Riker escaped with Gunnar through a back exit. After they had gotten far enough from the prison, Sean and Travis arrived to pick up Gunnar and Riker. On the way, Sean shared stories with Travis about Gunnar's incredible skills during missions in Afghanistan. Hearing this, Riker realized that Gunnar wasn't actually working for Dobbs. Quietly, Riker took a screwdriver from the car seat and hid it under his shirt. 20 minutes later, Gunnar and Riker switched to a different car. Gunnar thanked Sean for his help and then told Travis to go home with Sean, as he planned to continue the mission alone. After Travis and Sean left, Gunnar told Riker that Dobbs had kidnapped Luke. The reason why Gunnar broke Riker out of prison was because he wants to trade him for Luke. Then, Riker asked if Gunnar was sure that Dobbs would agree to the deal. Gunnar replied that if Dobbs refused, he would take them all down, including Riker. The scene then switches to Dobbs, who was on his way to deliver some drugs. Shortly after, he received a call from Gunnar, who told him that he had Riker with him. Gunnar said if Dobbs wanted to save his father, he had to trade him for Luke today. And Dobbs, who deeply cared for his father, agreed to Gunnar's demand. He also gave Gunnar the meeting location, which was at an abandoned factory. Soon after, they quickly headed to the meeting spot. 30 minutes later, Gunnar arrived at the location. He immediately called Dobbs, telling him to come out with Luke. Dobbs and his men appeared, holding Luke at gunpoint. They had agreed to exchange hostages, but after Riker was released, he suddenly stabbed Gunnar with a hidden screwdriver. Instinctively, Gunnar shot Riker, killing him. Seeing his father dead, Dobbs became furious and ordered his men to attack Gunnar. After defeating all of Dobbs' men, Gunnar chased Dobbs, who escaped with Luke on a helicopter, along with his right-hand man. At the same time, the DEA arrived to help Gunnar, but they were too late, as Dobbs flew off and Gunnar seemed to disappear. During the flight, Dobbs ordered his right-hand man to kill Luke as revenge for Gunnar killing his father. However, they didn't realize that Gunnar had already sneaked onto the helicopter. Gunnar fought and defeated Dobbs' right-hand man, but then Dobbs overpowered Gunnar, nearly throwing him out of the helicopter. Gunnar managed to regain control and turn the situation around. As Dobbs lay dying, Gunnar noticed that the helicopter was damaged. Quickly, Gunnar grabbed Luke and parachuted to safety. In the end, Gunnar successfully saved Luke and took down the notorious drug mafia leader, who had been the DEA's target for a long time. Gunnar finally brought Luke back home safely. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you want a chill family camping trip, avoid running into a mafia hideout. And maybe just stick to roasting marshmallows instead of dodging bullets and jumping out of helicopters.